Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fight Over Flight podcast, episode 3, Fight Against Your Anxiety. Now, Angel and I aren't medical professionals. We aren't doctors. We're just two men that have suffered from anxiety before it has tormented us, and we figured out a way to defeat it. So, during this episode, you're going to hear about anxiety, the causes, the effect, and the way to overcome it. And our goal is for you to watch this and be better off than you were before you watched it. Enjoy.
What's going on, man? I like that you're not in a suit today.
Yeah.
You're more casual today.
Yeah, a little bit more
athletic,
informal.
athleisure, I think they call it, right?
How's it going, my brother? How's your day going?
Good, man. You know, as usual, there's always things that you need to tweak and kind of learn how to get through. But other than that, it's been a good week.
Yeah.
It's been a good week. Just working here, editing videos, doing what I do, you know? How's your week?
I love it. Good. You know, last week was the release of the podcast.
Yeah, can we talk about that for a second? Thank you to everybody that watched and subscribed, because, I mean, we did not expect it to even get this much attention right away. So we got some touching stories from people for this episode, and I can't wait.
I'm super excited, and thank you for everyone. You know, like Angel just said, we got DMs, like crazy amount of DMs.
Yeah.
Crazy amount of messages saying how many people enjoyed it, and more importantly, how it already affected people.
Yeah.
And how like they were like, man, we need something that's authentic and real, and so we can hear real stories.
Yeah, and it was funny, the day we dropped it, people were asking us to talk about anxiety. And that was already our plan. Like, we were like, all right, we're going to do anxiety, then we're going to talk about masculinity and stuff. But it was always the plan from like the day that you and John got together. So I think it just goes to show that we kind of have something to offer people in that area. So, you know, I know we both did some research.
Yeah.
We got some little facts to share. So let's talk about it, man.
Yeah, it's exciting. And I wanted to let the listeners know that we can talk about anxiety for 24 hours straight.
Right.
So we're not going to go too crazy with it. We're just going to dive into as much as we can.
Right.
And the more episodes that come out, we're going to revert back to anxiety. And anxiety is going to be the topic of a lot of discussions with a lot of people.
I was so surprised at how many people are affected by anxiety. That's one of the first things, like, the first thing that when I looked it up, it was like more than half of Americans suffer from some form of anxiety, which is nuts to me. Like, how does one thing or one kind of I don't want to call it disease, one kind of sickness affect nearly half the population? And I think it has a lot to do with like the way we structure our culture here in America, where people are just told to run and to hustle and to always be working. And then on top of that, it has a lot to do with the way we interact with each other, where we're not completely vulnerable all the time. We have to kind of have this facade up in order to keep the professionalism going, you know?
Yeah, you're right. It's something that is kind of taboo.
Yeah.
That people never want to talk about, and people
or at the minimum, like, people will mention it and then dismiss it. Does that make sense? So, like, I have a friend that suffered really big from anxiety, and every time I would talk to her, she was feeling anxious. She's like, oh, I'm feeling anxious, I have to go. And then she wouldn't take any steps to get rid of the anxiety. It was just like whatever happened to her. You know, have you ever experienced something like that?
Yeah, where you just kind of feel it. You don't want to fix it.
Right.
And that's something that I wanted to talk about, where we're going to get it. What I believe, there's no cure for anxiety.
Right.
I don't believe that there's a cure. I don't believe that you can take a pill and it's going to go away. I believe that there is different changes you can make in your lifestyle. And with that, you can control the anxiety on a daily basis. Because there's a difference between curing it and controlling it. And I believe that where anxiety doesn't affect me anymore is because I've learned to control it by using specific techniques and specific things that we're going to, discuss today.
So, yeah, let's get into that a little bit. Because there was one thing I was watching. I'm a huge Jordan B. Peterson fan. And I was listening to him talk about anxiety and how it relates to depression and it relates to phobias. So, like, when people become anxious around certain things, it makes them fear those things and stops them from doing it. And he was using the example of, like, an elevator, right? Like, some people are scared to death of getting on elevators. They won't do it. And it's kind of because they at one point had a bad experience or have heard a bad experience when they were young that formed them and is embedded into them. So like he talks about this process of going from just looking at a picture of an elevator and just doing that until you're bored, to then standing in front of an elevator and doing that until you're bored, and little by little to the point where you can kind of get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm going to get on this elevator and we can stop whenever you want. We can, take it at your own pace. But it's just like such a interesting way to think about overcoming anxiety. Like face it head on.
Yeah. And he's one of the world's best, a psychiatrist?
Social psychologist.
Social psychiatrist, professor. So I love his stuff. And I think, and that's why I want to dive into like a little bit more of the technical. So what is anxiety?
Right.
And WebMD has anxiety listed in 4 separate categories. So there's panic disorders, there's social anxiety disorder, there's phobias, and there is like generalized anxiety. So we're not going to get into the more medical, like the phobias and all that stuff right now, but we're going to get into the generalized anxiety. How do you control it? How do you deal with it? And what steps should you take if you're going through it in that second? And so what's anxiety? I mean, to me, anxiety, I mean, the symptoms of anxiety, right? People think they're like having a heart attack.
Yeah.
You're sweating, you have chest pain, you can't breathe, you kind of like foggy, you don't really know what's going on. That's the symptoms that I got. I know people get different kind of symptoms. What kind of symptoms did you get when you would suffer from it?
It's weird because when I started like even having hints of anxiety, it wasn't so much of an outward facing thing, because like I guess it depends on your character and what you're like as a person. I'm not incredibly extroverted or outgoing, so like for me it was just like an internal F off to everything else around me, if that makes sense. Like I just was getting so frustrated with everything at once that I didn't want to take care of anything at all. And I just wanted to push everything away. Get away from me. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I think that's how I experienced it. And it's so funny to see how different it comes up for different people. Some people just start freaking out and they start just saying whatever comes off the top of their head. And some people, just like me, I just need to be alone all of a sudden.
Right. So for me, I'll actually go in the beginning. I used to think that people who suffer from anxiety were like crazy.
We're weak, right?
Yeah, we're weak. Weak is a better term. I used to think it's your mind, control it.
Yeah.
Like it's.
I used to think
if you have a thought in your mind, change it.
Right.
And my whole life, I never suffered from anxiety. So because I never suffered from it, I never knew what people were going through. Yeah. And it just happened one day. I mean, I don't remember. It was like an accumulation of things that were going on in my life that one day I thought I was having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And it woke me up at the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
And I drove myself to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. They look at me and they go, "No, Mr. Roman, you're fine. Your heart is as good as a heart can be."
And what do they always ask? Are you stressed at work?
Yeah, right. You're stressed and this and that. Because they started leaning towards anxiety. I said, "No, I don't suffer from anxiety." Yeah. I said, "This has got to be, a one-time thing." 2 days later, again, like 12 o'clock at night. And it's always at night because there's like something about when it's nighttime and you're by yourself and you're like in your apartment. There's like a little bit of a psychological factor.
Do you think it's like you just kind of getting overwhelmed with the possibility of things? Yeah, so like you're alone, so your imagination is just running wild and you start planning out scenarios that will eventually go wrong, even though like they haven't even happened yet.
Yeah, because now, I mean, I never did this before. So now I'm like, all right, if I'm having a heart attack and I have the heart attack in my living room and I'm by myself, no one can call the ambulance and I'm going to die.
That's exactly how I feel with epilepsy. Like if there's nobody around, what's going to happen? But I think with anxiety for me, it was more of like when I'm in the middle of something important, I'm like, okay, this is way too much. And especially if I'm not prepared, I'm not feeling confident, or I feel like somebody's judging me, then I'm just like, everybody just go away, and I'll storm out, or I'll like say something inappropriate to people. Like it's just that kind of like backed into a corner mentality, like my back's against the wall and I have to lash out.
See, now that's interesting because I didn't know what type of anxiety you suffer from, and you didn't know about mine, so we can make it fresh.
Yeah.
So we're completely different.
Yeah.
My anxiety lasted for about 3 months, for about 2 or 3 days a week, and it felt like I was having a heart attack. I actually had some symptoms of like blood clots in my legs, where I'm like, I think I'm getting a blood clot in my leg, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And I drove myself to the hospital like 3 or 4 times. No, I'm sorry, a month. It was like 3 or 4 times a month. I went like 10 times. You want to know how bad and how embarrassed I was?
What's that?
This is the first time I'm ever saying this.
Okay.
This happened only a couple years ago. This was 2017.
You know what? That's the thing. Like, I don't think anxiety is always necessarily a medical disorder that's diagnosable. You know, I think it's something that happens to people in seasons, but it's not. And I'm just like thinking, right?
Yep,
this
yep.
isn't fact based
Yeah.
or anything. But I think that's kind of what it is. We all have so many things to deal with that, you know, it's almost inevitable that we're gonna just be overwhelmed at one point.
Yeah. So what happened with me was my whole life I never had anxiety, but I was a very strong personality where I didn't open up about things. So I'll fast forward. I think my anxiety came from previous trauma. And
you're just experiencing it fresh now.
Later.
Yeah.
Yep. Because it's kind of like this trickling effect that eventually I was strong enough until I wasn't. 2017, around September of 2017, is the first time I drive myself to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Now, I never had anxiety and I hate going to the hospital. But over the next 2 or 3 months, I kept driving myself thinking I was having a heart attack. I was so embarrassed that I actually, on I think the 3rd or 4th time, I drove myself to another hospital,
right.
a further hospital, because they were like, all right, this guy's probably crazy.
Right, that's right up my alley.
Because I was struggling with anxiety, and I didn't know it.
Right.
And what I soon realized was the things that I see at my job, the stuff that I go through at work. When my grandfather, who was my best friend, passed away, my mom continuously got colon cancer. All of this was on my back. At the time, my fiance, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were fighting all the time. And I never cried. I never spoke to anyone about it, never told my friends, never opened up. So I kind of look at it like it was a block of ice. And every time something traumatic happened in my life that I didn't talk about, chip, boom, knock some of the block off. Oh, my grandfather passes away, boom. Oh, my mom gets sick again, more ice getting knocked down. More, and so this big block of hard, right, what I thought hardcore ice was just getting chip. And then, boom, whatever it was, crumbled it.
Right.
Now I wasn't strong enough. So I had to figure out, where is this coming from?
Do you think it could be something that happens because of the way that we're socialized or raised in today's, like, in our culture today? So we have a very kind of out in the open culture with social media nowadays. Like, you're a couple years younger than me, right?
Yep.
So when I was coming up, there was no Facebook, Instagram, nothing. And I'm not blaming social media. I'm not like demonizing it. But what I mean is that if we had something to express, we would express it person to person, right? We would just convey that emotion, or we wouldn't. And, you know, obviously the same symptoms can happen. But nowadays, everything is expressed through our phones. And it's almost like less likely that you're going to want to take that confrontation head on. So you go through confrontations that you should be going through in life, but you don't need to because we have all of this great technology. And then out of that, you just start to feel kind of like nothing is real, nothing is actually sentimental. And then that can kind of form. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never looked at it that way. I think you're onto something there, because I do want to talk about a little bit later about how social media plays into anxiety,
Right.
and why I think the anxiety is more prevalent now than ever.
Like the Instagram button.
Of course, all of that. Yeah. So I want to talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Because what to me is very interesting is the way that you struggled with anxiety. Because for me, anxiety was, and the people that I spoke to, it was, I feel like I'm getting a heart attack. I don't know what's going on. I can't control these emotions. Please help me out.
Right.
And that was it. Your type of anxiety is like, if you just get so much coming at you at once,
right,
then you shut down.
Yeah. I almost feel like it's like a boxer, right when he gets like a big punch to the nose, and then all of a sudden he's disoriented, so he can't really defend himself against the smaller blows, the jabs and the uppercuts and all that stuff, and he just starts getting hit more and more until he passes out. Like that's kind of how I feel. Like one big thing will happen to me that'll lower my resistance to everything else that's going on in my life, and that starts to pile on to me, and I almost stop trying, and I just let it kind of happen to me, and all of a sudden I go from being on this high to just like being on this super low, or rather like mediocre or regular, to like just being on this super low, where it's crazy to see the kind of contrast, because like you have a very extroverted manifestation of that, where I'm like quietly suffering, which I don't think either one is healthy.
No, none. I mean, none of them is healthy, and that's both ends of the spectrum, and that's very interesting, because I think that now that you're saying it, I'm kind of relating it more to what people go through. I think that people who work 50, 60, 90 hours a week, and are like a lot of creative people, I would say, would struggle with that. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, because they have to be creative. They have to be moving on demand. It's going.
There's no way to what's the word?
Systematically?
Yeah. There's no way to make it a regular thing. Like you can't just create regularly following a formula. So that causes all this like mental turmoil. That
So you're kind of like in this chaotic state.
Yeah.
And you just go. So when I was doing my research, I saw that people suffered with the kind of the heart attack, the heart palpitations and all that stuff. And yours, I didn't even see that. So that look
heart
at that.
palpitations.
Yeah, but I didn't even see like what you're talking about, you know. But another thing I thought was interesting was I think that actually what I want to get to, because I'm just like so stuck on yours now, because I think that a lot of people in the social media era, because of the creativeness, they go through that. And I did research, and I wanted to take notes on it, because I thought that this was so powerful. Is that there's bad anxiety, but then there's also good anxiety. And I never heard of that.
Yeah, explain that.
So the bad anxiety is related to future and past tense. So it's a future and past tense feeling, while the good anxiety is a present tense feeling.
It's almost like if you're nervous, it means it's important.
Yeah. And this was so interesting. I thought this was great, where it says, you know, if you're worried about what's going to happen tomorrow, and if you're worried about what's going to happen over the next 5 years, you are living in anxiety. It's like Will Smith explains when he gets ready to go skydiving. So before Will Smith first went skydiving, he told his friends, I'm going to go skydiving. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And then that night, he couldn't sleep because he was like, am I crazy?
Yeah.
I'm going to jump out of a plane. And he's now in fear where he's safe in his bed.
Right.
So he's safe in his bed and he can't sleep because the anxiety is just running through him, right?
That's such a good video.
On the way to the plane.
Yeah. Freaking out.
He's freaking out. He's trying to remain cool, but he's freaking out. And he's going over this like, I'm safe in the car, relatively safe. Well, I'm safe in my house, definitely. I'm safe in the car because I'm not going to fly out of the plane in the car. And as he's going, he's anxiety. It's killing him, right? But it's a future tense anxiety.
Right.
Then when he jumps out of the plane, it's one of the most blissful things he's ever done. So the actual point where he should be in fear and anxious, he feels free.
That's so.
So I think that when I'm doing this research, I see that if you're focusing on the future, on what's the outcome, where am I going to be in 3 years? What's going to happen? Is the market going to crash? Am I going to lose value in my home? Am I going to be in the job that I want? That future tense creates severe bad anxiety because these things have not even come yet, and you're worrying about it. Also, I believe where my anxiety comes from is a past trauma.
Right.
So if the future is that, the past is a trauma that you have not yet dealt with. You know, whatever you're going through, you know, you may have saw something 5 years ago that now is creeping back into your life, and it just out of nowhere takes effect.
Right.
And you can't, and you can't, like me, I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but it was the domino effect of the events happening in the past with you not dealing with it, you not telling anyone, you not reaching out for help, you thinking that you're weak for reaching out, all of that until one day the dominoes collapse and there's nothing left and you're by yourself and you're struggling. So that's the past. But when it talks about the present being a good anxiety, it's like when you're going up for a job.
Right.
And you're so excited for the job, but you're so nervous and you're there, but then you feel that into your preparation.
Yeah.
It's like this podcast right now. I get so excited to do this. Like it's like a beautiful thing. We get to talk to people. We get to talk. People get to hear, and it's awesome. But I'm still nervous,
Right?
And I get anxious about it because am I going to say the right things? Are people gonna like it? So I start to think. But then it fuels me to prepare and to put out original stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I thought that was cool, thinking of it in those three different aspects of your life. And if you're listening, think about it. When you struggle with anxiety, when anxiety hits, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
Is it the past, the future?
What could be, what was.
Exactly.
Yeah, all of that. It's so funny that you say that because I was listening to Jordan Peterson, and he was really interesting what he said. Like, it was kind of contradictory, but he said the real question isn't why we get anxious. The real question is how we're not always anxious 100% of the time. Because what he says is like, life is so overwhelmingly difficult, just from raising a family to going to work to figuring out what career you want to figuring out how to relate with interpersonal relationships. How is it that we're not always anxious?
I love that.
Right? It just changes everything. So now we think about, okay, what grounds us? What levels us? What makes us at ease? And those are the things we have to learn to further. So if what brings you to ease is knowing that you're set in like a certain career path and that's going to be your purpose and your goal, like we were talking about last week, then that's how you should be focusing on it. And I thought that was such an interesting way to look at it, to just flip it. Yeah. Like, life is crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like,
well, didn't we talk about it yesterday?
Yeah. Like
perspective.
You might feel mediocre. You might feel like I don't really have anything to be anxious about. But think about it not only in the context of your life, but in the context of like all of human history. How crazy is existence, period? The fact that you're here. And so that, of course, is going to give you some sort of anxiety. It's going to give you something.
Good old Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, man. That got me thinking big time.
I want Jordan Peterson on probably like the 100th episode.
That's the goal. Jordan, if you hear this, man.
Maybe he'll surprise us for Christmas or something. For real. But I now want to start talking about what we said about social media.
Right.
Because I think that anxiety is prevalent. And I actually want to know how prevalent. Mew, can you do me a favor, man? Can you run those? Can you let us know the statistics that we actually gave you? The boy Mute. Yeah. I know we gave him some statistics that we were running through,
right.
And we know just about, I think it was like how many people actually suffer with anxiety, so we can get some facts. Too. Yeah.
Anxiety disorder are the most common mental illness in the U.S., affecting 40 million adults in the United States aged 18 and older, or 18.1% of the population every year.
18% of the U.S. population is suffering from anxiety. And what was that? It was anxiety is the number one disorder in America?
That's what I thought I read. But
yeah, the first line you said.
The disorders are most common mental illness in the U.S.
Most common mental. I mean, that's crazy.
Wow.
18% is a lot.
You know what's crazy, man? It's not only that, but how...
And where was that? I'm sorry. Where was that from? What was the...
That was from ADAA.org. Anxiety and Depression Association.
Pretty reputable.
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
Huffington Post.
Wikipedia.com or YouTube.com.
Yeah.
No,
but what's crazy to me is that it's so normalized. So like, oh, you suffer from anxiety. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, get over it. There's not really productive step-by-step ways to deal with it that we've discovered like as a culture. So I think when we were talking about it in the beginning, having that step-by-step process of like, okay, what makes you anxious? Yeah. Figuring that out first. What is it that makes you anxious? What kind of situations? And then how do you confront those situations? Maybe you don't necessarily, like, let's say you get anxious when you have a job interview. Maybe you don't just go to more job interviews. Maybe you start by applying for jobs until you can't take it anymore. And then you start by getting dressed for the job. Little things that are just not necessarily huge leaps or you wouldn't think would make a difference, but they make all the difference in the world because they're rewiring something that's deep-seated in you. So, I mean, that's such an interesting statistic.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, and like you said, it's becoming more and more popular. And I want to know if it's, we're not going to know, but I'm interested in seeing how social media plays an effect and why
social
it's
media.
so much more, why it's more popular now.
Yeah, and this is just me pontificating, but I think it has a lot to do with comparison.
Yeah,
Because like, what do we
definitely.
when you're being anxious, and you can speak for your own, but you're thinking of a potential future as opposed to something else that you've seen, right? Like it's like, all right, I want to be a sergeant, I want to be a captain, I want to be this or that, because I've seen these people that inspired me. So you're naturally comparing your life to other people, your heroes maybe, your parents maybe, your brothers, sisters maybe, and then all of a sudden you're like, there's this friction because they did something great. Now you feel this huge amount of pressure to do something great too. And it's not necessarily healthy to think that way. The way that you should be thinking, in my opinion, is like, I have nothing to be anxious about. Everything that I have is provided for me because I'm abundant in my mentality, right? The kind of like the scripture, Philippians 4. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus.
Jesus, baby, Jesus.
Yeah, man.
I love it.
I think that's what it comes down to, right? Like, just like you have to have something outside of yourself that you trust.
Yes.
Something that you trust more than you.
Yes.
And it can't necessarily be another person because people are all flawed.
Well, I wasn't going to I wasn't going to be 100% transparent, and now I will.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a good way to lead into this.
Yeah.
So how I got out of my anxiety is through God. It's actually what brought me to the church, and that's where we met in our church.
Yeah.
So from September of 2017 till December, I was suffering from the anxiety. I didn't know what was going on, and Bianca's my fiance, we went to House of Worship. Right. Because Brian and Crystal were dedicating Riley.
Oh, wow.
So, listeners, this is going to be a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Brian, Crystal, and Riley are going to be...
They're going to be on the show.
They're going to be on the show, and that's probably going to be the greatest episode we'll ever do.
Yeah.
But they're the reason
why...
Short
careers.
Yeah. Right. That's the reason why we went. And we went there, and so Bianca, and she'll attest to this, was with me for 5 years.
Wow.
5 years, she'd never seen me cry.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the stuff we went through, my grandfather, my mom, financial struggles, she'd never seen me cry because that was for the weak.
Right.
I can't express my emotion like that. I'm a detective. I'm gonna be a SWAT operator. Right. I'm a martial artist. I'm a college baseball player. So I thought. I thought that this is what made you weak, right? And first day in church, I cried the entire service.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
The entire service.
It's that freaking blonde dude crying.
Yeah, so Bianca's like, okay. So I was like, maybe it was just because it was an emotional service. Yeah. So I went back the next day. I kid you not. I got baptized in March. From December to March, I cried every service on the floor on my face. And it was like pouring out of me. And the lesson that I learned from that, and so from that day, from December 2017 till now, August of 2019, I've had 2 anxiety attacks since, and I didn't go to the hospital. Once I had the anxiety attacks, I got out of bed, I started praying, in 10 minutes, it went away, just like that.
Right.
Vanished, basically. That's
amazing, because, that's what I mean when I say, something outside of yourself.
Yep.
If you don't believe in Christianity, do you? But there has to be some sort of foundation for who you are and some aim for who you are outside of people. Because when you do that, you leave too much up in the air and in control of other people. The reason that we were having this anxiety is because we had this projection of a future that somebody else mapped out for us. But what if that's not really for us? How could we actually know the truth? So I think that's such a amazing testimony, because it really speaks to the core issue about anxiety. Yeah. You're relying too much on yourself.
Yeah, and to go back to the social media thing, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think with social media. I think social media is a platform that can be used for the greatest of things, and it has done an amazing job. And I love social media, right? I think that anxiety comes from we got someone who wants to come into the podcast, I think. Are they trying to join?
Oh, yeah, your car. My bad.
Oh, my car's blocking.
We're going to have to...
All right, so we're going to take a pause, and we'll be back. And we're back, people.
So we had a little bit of a situation outside because Rob likes to park wherever he wants.
Right. All right. I'm going to tell them the real story.
Go ahead.
Angel had about 3 fans outside looking for an autograph, and they just interrupted our podcast.
It's a curse, man.
It's unbelievable.
It's a curse.
Are you kidding me?
I don't know. I mean, 200 out of those 250 views, 5 of them were outside.
Oh man. So
I forgot we were talking about.
Me too. But it's good because I wanted to get into the social media.
Yes.
And why I think that social media is one of the main reasons people are struggling with anxiety. And it's because I want to ask a question to the listeners. I want to ask them a question. What type of content are you consuming? Is it good or is it bad?
That's a great question.
Is it infecting your mind or is it impacting your mind?
Right.
So what are you viewing? Who are you following right now? Look at the next 10 posts. Are they actually people you care about? Are they actually things that you care about? Is it educating your mind? Is it giving you knowledge? Is it making you happy? Are you smiling? Or is it not?
Yeah.
Are you just looking at are you looking at people that post their best versions of themselves? Is that what you're looking at? Are you looking at the model on the beach? Are you looking at if you're like a powerlifter, you're looking at the powerlifter that's like the strongest guy in the world and you're trying to compare yourself to him? What are you feeding your mind?
Yeah.
And whatever you're feeding your mind on social media, you may think that
you're a bystander, you're not getting affected.
And you totally are. Because I can give you the scenario right here. Instagram. Oh man, I wish I was on vacation like them.
Right.
Oh man. Look at the way they look. And you're just getting the best of the best of the best. Versus you can follow content that are educating you. You can follow pages that are teaching you how to handle your finances, that are teaching you how to deal with anxiety, that are teaching you these things. So what are you feeding your mind? Is it infecting you or is it positively impacting you? And I think that that's a question that needs to be answered by the individual listener, because I know that when I'm looking at things that I wish I had, and I'm like, man, now I start to feel a little jealous. Now I start to feel a little envious. And these are not good emotions. These are emotions that are going to completely destroy you, because then you're going to go back to your life and you're going to always measure up what you're going through people on social media through their best.
It reminds me of this quote by Isaac Newton, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Which essentially means like everything that we do in life, we're standing on the foundation that was set for us by somebody else. And when we're looking at social media, when we're obsessing with certain kinds of content, those are the giants that we're standing on. Are they good or are they bad giants? Are they healthy or unhealthy? And I think a lot of us think that we are inventing our own worldview and we're inventing the way we see things just right up front. But we're subject to so much influence from when we were born to this moment, whatever age you are, that it's almost impossible for us to have a truly, truly unique thought. Truly, truly unique. And it's up to us to make sure that whatever is influencing us is leading us to the most true path of thoughts that we can possibly have. So I think that's what social media is good for. It's good to give us good influence, but it can also be a double-edged sword, because it's very easy for us to just grab whatever and just kind of be a vegetable for a little while and just binge whatever.
It's true, because then you can just get lost and you can just sometimes you can look at social media and you don't even know why you're doing it. Yeah, you just kind of just, I'm at a traffic light, I'm gonna look at social media. It's a commercial, I'm looking at social media. So you kind of there's no intention, right? And
it's like everybody knows about the dopamine spikes you get when you get a lot of likes,
and that's a big thing. So we talk about likes. I want people to start posting content on social media, and I guarantee them, like I'm guaranteeing that they're going to be much happier is if they post what they actually care about versus they post what they think their friends care about. Right. And what they think other people care about.
And that's, I think, where anxiety kicks in too, because people are thinking about what to post. And it's like, if I post my most authentic self and nobody likes it, then I'm being rejected. But it's like, no, people are just busy liking pictures of Lambos and, girls in bikinis and whatnot.
But think about that. Like, it's to some people that's detrimental. Right. That I'm gonna post at at the time that I think most people are watching, on the day that I think most people are watching, with the best filter. This is, I have my best outfit on, and 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 10 minutes go by, 22 likes. Like, who cares?
Right.
You know, if you put all your value in the likes, you're going to struggle with anxiety. But if you put your value in, okay, I got 22 likes, but 3 people messaged me and they said, that brightened up my day.
Right.
Oh, I learned something. That was funny.
I'm going to tap into my digital marketer now.
Yeah.
But this is a very Gary Vee thing to say, you know, like, it's not about the width of your social following. It's about the depth. How much of an impact are you making? And like, just to bring up the generational differences, like, I was born in 88. You were born what year? 91. So like, our generation, I think, was the last to live in both a pre-internet and post-internet world. So we kind of have that foundation of like, we know that there's some other kind of communication, but we just can't figure out why we miss it. Whereas like these kids nowadays, from the minute that they hit like 2 years old, they have a phone in their hand and they have iPads in their hand, and it's almost like that's part of the world. So they're growing up not even knowing what this emptiness is. Like, what is this emptiness for intimacy, not even sexually, but just, you know, on a social level with other people. They have it, but they don't have it.
Yeah, like when I was in middle school or in high school and we went to a party, everyone spoke to each other.
You were at the party.
If you wanted the girl's number, you had to walk over and get the girl's number.
Oh my God, that's so horrifying.
Like, there was I just remember a time where you and your friends are talking, and we never struggle with anxiety.
Right.
Teens now, so the highest suicide rate among any age group are teenagers.
Wow.
How's that possible?
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, and like I said, we're at this party, we're talking to each other, and we're like, I'm going to get 3 numbers. And it's like, no, I'm going to get 4 numbers, you know? And it's just like, and it was a cool thing. And we weren't dehumanizing women and nothing. We were just laughing. We were listening to music, having a good time, and connecting. We as humans need to connect. Right. And that's something that you're talking about, that there's a void that they don't have. But I also don't want to beat up on the social media or the new generation, because we have to think of a solution to the anxiety. So what I want to tell you is, if you are struggling with anxiety and you think it's related towards social media, the lack of connection with people, maybe the jealous and the envious side of things, first I want to say identify it. So you identify, just like we mentioned earlier, when you're getting anxiety, or think about the times that you had anxiety in the past, identify it. Identify what caused it. Is it a future tense thing? Is it a past tense thing? Is it a social media thing? Identify where your anxiety is coming from. So now you know. Now you're aware. Next step. Realize that you're not going to die from it.
Right.
Because I know my anxiety led me down to roads of I think I'm going to die. You're not going to die from it. And whatever you're going through, we have to just then figure out ways to cope with it. And how you do that is talk to people who care about you. Talk to loved ones. If you're suffering, I'm talking about general anxiety. If you're suffering with severe anxiety because you had like a serious trauma, if you were, you've seen someone die, you may be sexually assaulted. If you're suffering from serious trauma, I highly suggest seeking professional help. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're broken. I've spoken to a therapist before. I think everyone needs to speak to a therapist.
I've done counseling.
I've done counseling. And I think that it's because you're getting a perspective from a professional that can then help you out, who's helped people out in the past. So if you're truly struggling, I'm going to tell you right now, this podcast is going to be, it's going to be able to help what you're going through. And we're going to give you real advice. And we're going to give you advice that we've gotten from other people and through research. But we're also going to say seek professional help. Yeah,
seek community.
Community,
as well,
it's going to help you.
Yeah, a big part of community that I think pairs with professional help is that people aren't necessarily, they don't have to tell you the truth, but they want to because they care so much about you.
Yes,
and that's what community can do for you, and that's why places like a church or a club that you go to, not like a party club, but like a gathering of people that you go to, is super important to your development socially, mentally, everything. Because if you don't have that, you don't have the mirror to put up against yourself and say, this is wrong with me, this is wrong, I need to tweak that.
Exactly. Or it's not wrong with you.
Right.
And things are going well, and your trajectory in life is the best it can possibly be. So I want to tell people that after you identify it, you figure out where it's coming from, you ask for help in community, you speak to therapists, you try to figure out what's really going on. And then after that, like, you realize it's not so bad, you know, and figure out ways to incrementally attack it. And when I say incrementally attack it, I mean, if you're getting anxious to speak, you don't want to speak to people because you're so much in your phone that you feel like if you have to have a real human connection with someone, you freak out. Start speaking to people that you're most open with, right? Your siblings, your parents, whatever. Do that, and then talk about things that you wouldn't normally talk about. So not get like creative, right, and get like controversial. So talking about different things that are gonna have some back and forth debate, are gonna have some things with people that you love and care about. So then you can now branch out to strangers and do it. So you're gonna be exposed to whatever you're anxious of, and you're gonna realize it's not that bad.
Right. It's those tiny steps that make all the difference. Can we switch gears just for a
second?
second?
Yeah, of course.
I want to read some of the stuff that people sent to us when we asked about anxiety, because I think that I got some crazy answers, like crazy in a good way. Like they were very vulnerable about. Right. So let me pull it up.
Let's hear what real people are saying. Yeah. Because that's like the best part about this, connecting with people and hearing what they're going through, so the other listeners can say, "Hey, I'm not alone."
So this first one is countless panic attacks, fainting, throwing up, terrible. That's what they said. So, I mean, it sounds similar. Maybe not. Maybe this one's a little more severe than what you go through. But, you know, I know this person, and they're, I think they're relying too much on themselves. Like we said, you know, they don't see comfort in community or something to rely on besides a person.
Can you read that again?
Countless panic attacks, fainting, throwing up.
Okay. So what I would say to that person, I think that you're on the right path where I don't know who it is, but they're depending on themselves, where they need to find a purpose for the everyday life, and they need to figure out what they need to. I don't want to say, because that's still so vague that I don't really know what they're struggling with, but. If it's severe like that, where it's like messing with your daily activities, I would say talk to the people that are closest to you, figure out what's going on, maybe seek some professional help. But really, I tell people, man, like, if you knew my God, you would really know how to approach these difficult things in life. Right. Because what God did for me was, and it's not just being in a church, it's that what God did for me was He showed me the way to being able to talk to people, to like-minded people, to people who have struggled. And it's not, going to church wasn't what took anxiety away from me. It was talking to the people in the church. Right. It was the people that have gone through it, that have helped people through it, the community. That right there, it doesn't matter if it's in the four walls of the church or it's in a park. Right. But you're speaking to people that have that foundation of God and have that foundation of love, hope, caring, grace. It's just when you're around those people, your body starts to change. So I want to say to that person, man, you know, if you're throwing up and if it's serious, I say first identify where it's coming from, speak to people, and get involved in the church, or get involved with people who really care. Yeah, who really care about you. You know,
I think a big part of the church aspect too is correcting your mentality, because a lot of times what will happen in a church setting, for people that don't know, is you'll be surrounded by a group of people sharing, and you're just sharing genuinely, authentically what you're feeling, and people will offer not necessarily a solution, but a new perspective. Yes. And a lot of times just that little switch of like, this is actually how you should be thinking of that, changes everything. And it's what makes the difference between a good church and a bad church. Yes. Is like, can you do that? Can you confide in somebody? And can they actually change your perspective? Yes. And I think that would help this person.
That's good. So and I think that's the foundation of it. Do not be alone. Right. Don't go through this alone. So that's what I should have said first. Do not go through this alone. Right. Tell people what you're struggling with and allow them to help you change your perspective or to help you grow. Because the people that are closest to you are going to be the ones that are going to do it.
So the next one that I got, and then you can share some. This one kind of surprised me, but it's death trapped in a bottle waiting to explode while being inside of a volcano.
That's deep.
Yeah, I think that was like, kind of a metaphor, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can feel that way.
In the moment?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It can feel like it can feel the worst of the worst in the moment.
Right.
In the moment, it's like, right? It's like you think that everything's closing in. The walls are closing in. You can't breathe. You can't function. So if that right there describes the moment of anxiety.
Yeah. I think a good way that I learned to describe it was if you have a fear of heights, that feeling you get when you're like, about to fall, is that for a prolonged period of time.
Yep.
That's what.
Yeah. And when you're going through that, when you're feeling it, you need to take a step back from life.
Right.
In the moment, so whoever suffers from anxiety, when you're having an anxiety attack, a panic attack, something related to anxiety, take a step back and breathe. Like get as like simple as breathing. Because if you can breathe in and you can breathe out, you can hold it for 3 to 5 seconds and you can breathe out. And if you're just focused on what's giving you life, just the breathing and nothing else matters. So I meditate, and that's something that I believe helps with anxiety as well. Meditation and prayer for me go hand in hand. But what I do is if I'm struggling, so when I struggle from the anxiety attacks after I started going to church, what I did was I started praying, but I started also focusing on my breathing.
Right.
So when you're in that, when things feel like it's going crazy, close your eyes and breathe.
Yeah.
You can do that for a couple minutes and you'll see things start to change.
Yeah, because it's essentially a biological shift that you're doing intentionally. That's the first thing. Like you're deciding to focus on your breathing. And then one of the things that happens with anxiety is it's too much overwhelming problems going on in your head at the same time. So the first way to kind of stop it, and like you said it perfectly, take a step back.
Yeah.
Just breathe.
Breathe.
And make it simple. Like I'm breathing right now. What else could go wrong? There's nothing is wrong if I'm breathing.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you have.
Yeah. You know what? It's crazy because I asked someone, I said, I just wanted some feedback on people who suffer from anxiety and out of, I think I asked who suffer from anxiety. It was like a poll on Instagram and it's still running, but 247 people have seen it and 53 voted yes that they suffer from anxiety.
Wow.
Or have suffered. I mean, that's too big of an amount. So we have to realize that anxiety is part of our life, and we just have to control it because there's no cure. We just have to control it. So I want to read this. Actually, I don't even want to go into a question. I thought this was so powerful.
Poem?
The poem that I was talking about.
So why don't we close with that? Let's close.
Yeah.
Let's close. You can read that, and then we'll be off the air.
So
before we leave you, and we have Rob read the poem. Thank you so much again. Please like this, comment what you guys genuinely think. Share this with people who have anxiety or need help with anxiety, and just remember, if you want to be interactive, you want us to read your opinions and stuff on this podcast, just follow Rob or me on Instagram, Angel Kiros, Rob Roman. And let's take it away, man.
Yeah. And so if we're going to end with the poem, before I end with it, I want to give people a little checklist of what they can do. So if you're struggling with anxiety and you're going through it, as soon as it happens, identify what's going on. Once you're in it, so there's gonna be two things of two tips. One, if you're going through the anxiety and it's happening right now, how do you deal with it? You take a step back and you breathe. You focus on your breathing. Get as simple as, if I'm breathing, I'm living life. If I'm breathing, I'm alive. If I'm breathing, I am okay. And do that for several minutes, and I guarantee you that it's gonna help with your anxiety. Once the anxious state leaves you, because when there's too much chaos going on, I don't want you to focus on anything else but breathing.
Right.
Once the anxious state is gone, I want you to do these things. I want you to identify what made you anxious. Is it a future problem? Is it a past trauma? Identify it. Is it something that you saw on social media that you were envious or you were jealous and you were imagining a life that you don't have and you think you want. Identify whatever it is, and then realize. And then once you identify it, then go through it.
Right.
Like, take incremental steps to see, okay, this isn't what I really want. This isn't so bad. You know what? My life is going very well. And switch your perspective.
Yeah.
Switch your perspective immediately. Focus on the present. Because when you're focused on the present, things are going to go much better than worrying about the future and dwelling on the past. If you are suffering from stuff from the past, from a trauma, seek help, talk to people, and open up about it. Confront it, 100%. If it's future tense, don't worry about the future. Yeah. Today is all that matters. So I just wanted to give that little checklist to people. And also, focus on your health. Eat things that are good for you and exercise. Because if you exercise, you're going to feel better. And when you feel better, you're going to move more. And when you move more, it changes everything in your body. Because we were made from the beginning of time to move. Our body needs to be in motion. So if you move, if you work out, you exercise, you're going to look good, you're going to feel good, and you're going to perform more. Right. It's that cycle. You're going to perform more, and you're going to perform better. And the better you perform, the better you feel. Right. So focus on your health. Be around people who care about you. Your social media should only be filled with things that are going to make you better, make you smile, make you happy. That's it. Yeah. Nothing else. If you can follow these steps, I think that you're going to be okay. So now I want to get into the poem that kind of ties this all in together. I've never really spoken to this female. She just saw the post about anxiety, and she said, I'd like you to read a poem that I wrote, and people don't even know that she suffered from anxiety in the past. Wow. So this is the poem. Panic rushing, heart racing, eyes wandering, mind pacing, uncontrollable fear seeping in, making everything I see start to spin. Sweat drops down my spine. My body doesn't feel like mine. I try to convince myself I'm fine, but somehow everything is misaligned. I can't explain it too well, but I'm trying my best. Imagine trying to sleep, but never getting any rest, or feeling your heart physically beating out of your chest, along with the thoughts that consume you and make you obsessed. Like those dark days that turn my mind into a maze, obsessed thoughts that put me in a haze. I can't pinpoint the situation or the exact time or location that caused this manifestation to have my whole world in acceleration. But as quickly as my brain taunts me and scares me as the images I see, as uncontrollable the situation may be, somehow, some way, I know I can be set free. Then I feel his hand on mine, which helps me see straight. He whispers that I'm fine, and it helps me let go of the weight. I collapse into his chest, the one I know like home. Now I know I can finally rest, because I know I am never alone. He guides me when I cannot see. He gives me breath when I have no air. He turns me into a better me. He is the answer to my only prayer. Now, this person told me this can mean many things. If you're spiritual, for them it's God. And if you're spiritual, it's God. If you're a female or a male, it doesn't have to be a male hand. It can be a parent, a sibling, a best friend. It can be someone that you can depend on. So when you have God or people you love, friends, family, that you can depend on, if you can just tell them what you're going through, and you can give them your pain, you can give them your anxieties, you can give them your fear, then you'll be set free and you'll be okay. And it was actually a positive message. And she said that she hasn't suffered from anxiety in a very long time. And she made this poem to let people know that you're not alone. And as long as you can surround yourself around the right people, you're going to be all right.
I love it. That concludes episode 2.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.